Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here, where we discuss about fear of other people's opinion. And it's so nice to have Eli here to be answering your question. But first, Eli, can you tell us about what is fear of other people's opinion?
First time I heard the acronym FOPO was Michael Gervais, who has a really good podcast and blog, Finding Mastery. I really love it. Actually, I heard him interviewed on by Tom Bilyeu on Impact Theory, and he made this acronym, and I thought, wow, it's in my observation of the human experience, my own experience. There are just so many little places in our daily lives where we are modifying our behavior, or we're maybe holding ourselves back, or there's just so many times when we're choosing a course of action based on our perception of other people's opinions of us. If I say this, if I do this, somebody somewhere is going to have an opinion about it, right? My mom, my auntie, my whoever. And we don't, the thing is, we're just not that conscious of it most of the time. There's just so much of this embedded programming. So fear of others, fear of other people's opinions, a lot of times is just not conscious. It's something that's baked into us so deeply that we don't even realize that it's part of us. And it's basically just um, when we think about doing or saying something, and we get a feeling in us that makes us stop, or like stops us. Yeah, it's usually stopping us. So that's, for me, that's what fear of other people's opinions means.
Thank you for sharing that. Now we have few of our viewers here who asked some question. I'm gonna read them, and Eli will be answering those questions. So we have here from Namaste from Bobby. Are there times when it's inappropriate or unwise to share your thoughts and beliefs?
Yeah, for sure. I would say I think so. I mean, this is obviously a subjective thing. We all have to decide in the context of this conversation, and how it relates to the fear of other people's opinions. I think what you might be asking here is like, is it a good goal to completely eliminate the fear of other people's opinions so that we would, and by the way, from now on, I'm going to say FOPO because it's too many syllables to say the whole thing. So, I'm imagining that maybe you're imagining that if we completely eliminate FOPO in our lives, that we would then go around speaking our minds all the time with no filter. And I guess I'll just start out by saying I really do think that it should be our goal. An ideal goal would be to consistently and constantly over your lifetime raise your awareness of when you are experiencing FOPO, because many times it's just not there. You're not aware of it. So raising our awareness of it so that we can choose when to listen to it, or when we think it's real or not. Um, if you are about to say something to someone and you think to yourself, well, I I'm pretty confident that if I say it with these words in this tone, because I kind of understand how brains work, and I know this person, that if I say it that way, it's gonna trigger their crocodile brain and their amygdala, and they're gonna freak out, and I'm gonna trigger them. You certainly don't want to do that, right? So it's not necessarily about being afraid; it's about just being aware and being knowledgeable. So I think, yeah, the more we raise awareness of where we're worried about what would happen if we do or say something, then we can make better decisions, more conscious decisions about whether or not it's a good idea. Um, but we, but the goal is to get to the point where you're aware enough so that you're not automatically avoiding something. You're not automatically deciding not to do it, right? So let's say you're thinking about, I don't know, let's say you're thinking about traveling solo because you heard someone told you it's a really good idea for growth, right? And so you're thinking about doing it, and you think, oh, well, if I tell my mom I'm going to do that, I know she's going to, you just start imagining that your mom's not going to approve. And, just coming up with a random example here, right? But if you project that into your mind and you think that someone is going to judge you for something or they're going to have a problem with it, and that just paralyzes you and it controls you, and then you don't even pursue it. It's like, never mind. Like, you just don't even go down the path of thinking. You don't really start planning. You don't really think about it, right? So that would be where you're just not aware. So I guess just to kind of close the answer to that question, definitely I think part of human mastery is communication and relationships, and to be really good at them, we need to be better and better and better at understanding what body language, tone, words will make people understand us well. And I do think we should try to speak truth, and we should try to give people real honesty, but we have to learn how to do it in a way that the right timing and the right setting, and whether it's worth it or not, what the relationship is. But yeah, I think I guess I'll wrap it up there.
Thanks, Eli. We have another question from John Paul Branzuela. How do I get over my fear of other people's opinion?
Yeah, so that's the broad topic today. It's not something that we're going to be able to flip a switch and do overnight, and it's not something that I think we will ever do completely, because, and I'm sure somebody else's question will probably get to this later, but it's baked so deeply into us that we're probably never going to get rid of it completely, right? So as I was saying before, I think the goal for me is to just raise awareness. And the more you understand what's going on when you feel the fear of other people's opinions. So let me just break it down a little bit. We are most of the time, I think, kind of going through life with some little radar going off, some radar scanning the choices we're about to make, the things we're about to say or do, and we're imagining what other people would think about it. Sometimes it's when you're walking down the street, you're wondering, you're imagining that people are looking at you, right? And you're imagining what they're going to think about the way you're dressed or the way you walk or whatever, right? So it's just like all these little micro things that we do every day. And we are constantly kind of scanning the world around us, and we're imagining other people have opinions about us. Sometimes it's like I remember myself, it was my mom. I was actually on the other side of the world. I was already here in the Philippines for a year or something, and I hadn't seen my mom in quite a while. And I was already in my late 30s by then. And I'm in my late 30s, right? And I'm on the other side of the world, and I'm noticing that these little tiny decisions that I'm making in my life, that I'm actually worried, that I'm feeling some emotional resistance to doing what I think I really want to do, or that I think I should do, because I'm imagining my mom would have an opinion about it, right? That she wouldn't approve. And I just was stopping and thinking about it. And I'm like, my mom has no awareness of pretty much anything I ever do in my life anymore, right? And yet I've still got this concern baked in. And yes, she cares about me, and I'm sure she thinks about me sometimes, but she has no awareness. And she's probably not even thinking about me, even though she's my mom. How much more so everybody else? The thing is, ask yourself this. Do you actually think that people are thinking about you that much? Like, if you really ask yourself, the answer is no. Are you really thinking about someone else and judging them all day long? Like, your brain doesn't stay on anyone very long, right? You might think about somebody for 30 seconds and, okay, maybe you occasionally have some little judgments or whatever, right? I think letting go of judgment is a whole nother topic that it's a good idea to work on letting go of judging people. But even if somebody does judge you, it's like 30 seconds. And then their brain goes back to worrying about what other people think about them. That's what they're doing all day long. Or they're busy with all the things that keep them busy, right? People are just busy all the time. They're not thinking about us. But something in our brain is telling us all the time that these people whose opinions we care about are thinking about us all the time. So I guess the first step for me in getting over the fear of other people's opinions is starting to talk to notice when you're feeling it, and to start talking to yourself and asking yourself questions like, this opinion that I think this person has right now, is it true? How do I know it's true? Can I actually find opposite evidence? And for me, the opposite evidence, that's the trump off it, opposite evidence, is that people just aren't thinking about me. That's not happening, right? So Yeah, so I think again, it's like we'll probably never get rid of it completely, but you do want to notice how much power it has over you, and start to ask yourself, like, is this real? And do I want to keep living my life under the oppression of this fear when it's made up, and they're not even thinking about me? Okay, and the last thing I'll say on this topic, or just on this, I'll get back to another question here, is that what we imagine, what the opinions that we think other people would have of what we're about to do or what we just did, we actually have no idea if we're right. We're projecting. You are projecting what you think about yourself, or what your perception of that person's judgment would be on you, but you actually have no idea. If the person really understood your situation, a lot of times they would support you in the thing that you think they would judge you on. Like, you're just wrong a lot of the times, right? So just be recognizing also that these opinions that we think they would have of us, if they knew what we were doing or about to do, we're projecting it into their mind, and it's not real. They don't even know. So those are some basic tips that I would share.
Thanks, Eli. Anton made a comment here. He says, I believe this is one of the common fears of Filipinos since most of us have close knit families.
Yeah, totally. I didn't grow up in this culture, but I've been here 10 years. And after a few years being here, I started really observing the very deep roots of this power, So the theory goes that as humans evolved, we used to be, if you go back 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 years, like, humans were here on the earth, and more than 10,000 years ago, we were probably mostly hunter gatherers, right? We're moving around, we're in a tight knit, small community, and we completely rely on each other. And if you get ostracized or kicked out, you probably starve and die, or you get eaten by some predator, right? That's the theory. The theory is that we have baked into our programming of the way our brains are wired, is that we need social approval, and that if we feel like we're going to lose it, we freak out, even when it's not real, right? And we don't live in that world anymore. We don't live in a world where if somebody has a negative opinion of you, you die. But it feels like fear of death. And especially all the more so when those people are your family, because it's your closest, tightest, safest, most secure set of people. And I think that one of, Anton didn't ask a question, but I totally agree. And I've observed that I think, and I'm not the only one who's observed this, that while there definitely are some good things about having tight-knit families and having a culture that's built off of tight-knit families, there can be some really negative things too, because when a person, an adult, sees opportunities or sees options or choices that they believe, based on everything they're learning, would be really good for them, right? Let's just say the one I used earlier, I really like this one because I think solo travel is one of the easiest ways to grow yourself. You just do this really scary thing and you go to another city or town or island or maybe even country someday alone, and it scares the heck out of you the first time you do it, but it grows you so much, right? But if you don't, like, so many times the things that we see for ourselves that we think are good for us, if we perceive that people around us wouldn't approve, or if they even verbally oppose us, right? And then our brains just freak out because we're afraid that we'll lose the approval of the people that we care about the most. But the reality is, and you can find many, many, many evidences. Go watch many of the Emerge Stories interviews that we've done so far. We can find many examples of people who have perhaps earned the temporary scorn of their family by making decisions that were unpopular. But what happened? They didn't lose their families, right? It's like your family doesn't ever disown you permanently. And so a lot of times we have to learn that in order to grow, if growth is your priority, you're going to run into situations where your family either truly doesn't approve of it and you have to kind of navigate that. You have to have conversations with them. If you guys want to talk more about that, please ask questions. I can go deeper into that one. the conversations with people are critical. Or your family may not actually disapprove, but you think they would, right? So I'll just say it again. If you want to be on a journey of never-ending growth, if you always want to be getting better as a person, if you want to be pursuing your potential, you are going to run into places where you either perceive that family and friends and other people are going to disapprove of your choices, even though you think that they're pretty well thought out. You're listening to mentors, you're reading books, and you're like, no, I'm really sure this is a good idea for me to get this experience. And then you're gonna run into places where you are afraid because you think other people will disapprove, or they actually verbally say that they disapprove. So that's my thought for now on that.
Thanks, Eli. I have this question from Keisha. It's very interesting. Was there an occasion when you use FOPO to your advantage?
Keisha, I'm wondering if you're asking if I used fear of other people's opinions by having an opinion that made somebody else afraid, or that I used my own fear of other people's opinion. I'm gonna assume it's the latter because the first one is definitely a yes, but not. I wouldn't do it intentionally, not consciously. It's like intimidation. Would that count? Anyway, so have I used my own fear of other people's of opinion, my own FOPO to my advantage? That's a tough one. Nothing's coming to mind immediately, other than being aware. It's like when I've become aware. I guess I would say yes, because recognizing that I'm afraid of something or I'm leaning away. I guess I kind of do this every day, to be honest. It's like when I notice that I'm avoiding something. It's like this energetic leaning back. I'm leaning away from something because I'm afraid, and specifically because I'm afraid of somebody's opinion. I've built the habit of not allowing myself to lean away because I don't believe in it. That's not a good reason to not do something. And typically, and this is what my book is all about, Scary Equals Happy, is I actually believe it's the opposite. I believe that if there's not an actual danger to your health or life and you're just kind of scared of something, that thing is probably something you need to lean into. And with people, it's usually a conversation, almost always. Like if you have FOPO and you're like, I want to do this. I feel like this is the thing that's right for me right now, and I'm moving away from it. It's a conversation. Like it's figuring out how to talk to that other person about what you're planning to do, try to get some alignment, try to find out how they would feel about it, see if they, even would actually have an issue with it. But yeah, I guess using it to your advantage is not going to just disappear. So when you do become aware of it, it's like a signal. It's like saying, hey, this is something you actually need to do. You actually need to address it. You need to lean into it. So that's probably my answer to that.
Yeah, I think I want to share some experience about this when we went to a club dancing, and I have this want to dance in the stage, but I was so afraid and shy that people might look at me and judge me. But then when I noticed that, I use it as an invitation to challenge myself to overcome that fear of dancing, like on top of the stage. And when I did it, it was definitely very rewarding. I feel like I've conquered something. So yeah.
I was impressed too, because she wasn't drinking. So pretty impressive. Very scary.
Yeah. Felt good though. We have here from Live Life You Love, Army. What are the common signs or symptoms of someone struggling with a fear of people's opinion?
That's a really good question. I would say probably they feel conflicted, not aligned with themselves, stuck. I think most of the time when we're feeling stuck in life, it's probably because we're not pursuing things that make us feel alive. We're not taking risks. We're playing it inside the box that somebody else mostly probably scripted for you. And sometimes we're living our lives in a way that it's what we think we're supposed to do, and nobody really scripted it for you, but it's sort of like you're living according to the way that you think is a great, it's like the model way to live based on your family or whatever. So I would say I love that question. I think, and by the way, guys, thank you. It's so cool that you guys are here live with us doing this and answering, actually asking questions. So thank you so much for being here. Yeah, I think the most common sign would be, well, from the inside, from the perspective of you would feel not aligned with yourself, not aligned with, like, your life doesn't feel voluntary. If a lot of your life feels like it's like you're doing things that you're not really 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 excited and happy and aligned with, and maybe, yeah, feeling stuck, maybe a little purposeless, and just probably lack of progress in general. I think fear of other people's opinions is one of the strongest causes of why we actually just don't live the way we don't live our potential, and we don't grow and we don't progress the way we want to.
I love that. I also love what Bobby wrote here. What others think of me is none of my business. Your opinion of me says more about who you are than who I am.
Yeah, totally true. Bobby, you can do the next live stream for real on some topic, this one if you want, but yeah, that's really so true. We could spend our entire lives trying to be accurate or know, right, what other people actually are thinking about us. Good luck. You'll spend your whole life doing it. And where will it get you? What we're actually doing is we're spending a large majority of our time and energy guessing. And I think we're guessing mostly wrong. But even if occasionally you are guessing right, that person is judging you. Like Bobby's totally right. When you are judging someone, right? It's because you're making assumptions about what you see. So you see some data point about somebody's behavior, their choice, their words, whatever it is, and you can observe your own judging, and you'll know that this is really true. You don't know the whole story. You don't know what they ate that morning, how badly they slept. You don't know what's going on in their lives. You don't know their stress levels. You don't know their anxiety levels. You don't know any of that, and you don't know what they're actually thinking. You don't know what they meant when they said what they said. There's so many times when we are judging people on just very, very little understanding, right? And so, yeah, sometimes people are going to do that also to you, but that's because maybe they're in a bad mood, or it's the way their lens that they're looking at the world through, right? If you have a lens that you're looking at the world through that tells you that, you're just automatically going to be offended by certain types of behavior, certain words. If I use the F word, some people will have, you'll have an immediate aversion to it, right? I used to, there's a lot of things that I used to judge because I was wired to believe that they were not good. So, yeah, there's just it's impossible. It's impossible to know how other people are seeing you. And I think probably most of the time, when we are just comfortable being ourselves, people appreciate that. And they probably are they're probably evaluating you much more positively than you think. It's probably not nearly as negative as you think. And again, just remember, they're not thinking about you for more than probably 20 seconds.
Exactly. We have more question coming from Keisha. Do you think that keeping people away or not informing them about your plan will remove fear?
That's a really nice question, Keisha. So let's say you're anticipating doing something, you're planning to do something, you believe that, I'm assuming that in this scenario, you believe that people whose opinions you actually kind of care about would not approve. And therefore, in order to go ahead and do the thing, will it reduce fear to not tell them, to just make them not aware? Well, I guess it could. and maybe they don't need to know. I don't know. I think this is just a case by case basis, and you have to ask yourself, let's see, what would I ask myself here? Going back to kind of the illustration I was saying, or the experience I noticed where I had this baked in wiring to just be so afraid of what my mom would think about me based on anything I did, right? And I just had that, it was just programmed. When I started questioning it and I started really thinking about it, I realized, well, she's actually not aware of so many of these things she's not aware of, and she never would be, and she doesn't have any reason to be, and she doesn't need to be. Like, it doesn't affect our relationship at all for her to know or not know. It doesn't matter. It's just in my head, right? So yeah, I think part of that realization was like, yeah, there's a lot of these little decisions I'm making where I'm still worrying about this person's opinion, and they just aren't involved, and they don't need to be, and they never. It's not going to come up. It's not part of our relationship. It's not part of our relationship. So I think the question that I might ask would be, is withholding this from this person, does it have the potential to weaken or damage the relationship? And if the answer is yes, then maybe it's not about your fear, but it's about you're shoving the fear down in the basement by saying they're never going to know. But then if they do know, and part of you, and here's the thing, I think if the answer is yes, if you look at the thing you're about to do, you say like, I'm considering doing this, and I believe this person would maybe not approve of it, but is it related to our relationship? Are there any commitments that I have to this person that I'm sort of breaking here? Is there anything, where this person really has a right or really has a kind of legitimate expectation that I would not do this thing or I would do it, whatever, right? And therefore, if they knew that then there would be a problem in our relationship would actually degrade, or there would be some trust lost because I'm breaking an agreement, sort of. If there's even a halfway yes, then I think it will mess you up, because deep down inside you, there's always going to be this little feeling, and there's going to be this weirdness in the relationship where you're actually creating a break or a distance in the relationship. They don't necessarily consciously know about it, but energetically, I think it will matter. So I know that's a little bit straying from the fear question, but I wouldn't totally recommend a habit or a yeah, I wouldn't. I'm not sure I'd recommend getting in the habit of just not telling people so that you won't feel afraid, if that makes any sense. What I would recommend is, if you care about the relationship and you think it will affect it, just talk. Like, have the conversation, because the scary conversations are always they're always worth it, even when they get ugly. Anything else?
Yeah, we have a question from Army. How can friends, family members, or colleagues support someone who is struggling with FOPO?
Support other people that are struggling with it. Yeah, it's a good question. I see this a ton in people all around me. And yeah, I think as with anything else, when you are aware of a challenge that somebody's going through, and maybe you've gone through it yourself, or maybe you're a little bit ahead on your journey in some way, is to just hold space for them and help them learn to be more aware. So a lot of times it's not so much about the decision they make, but about learning itself. So, let's say, I don't know, if you guys can give me scenarios, I'd love to hear anybody who can think of a real life scenario that you've experienced in your own life, maybe recently even, where you felt like FOPO kind of kept you from doing something that you wanted to do, or it altered your choices in a way that you're not actually that happy with. I'd love to hear those scenarios, because I'm trying to make up scenarios here and they're not coming to me that quick. But
How about? Oh, sorry.
no. So when you see someone, this is what usually happens to me. I see someone who maybe I'm inviting somebody to go somewhere, and like, hey, why don't you come on this trip with us, or why don't you come visit us, or do this thing that I think it would be good for you if you travel alone, whatever it is. Just it's I'm seeing someone faced with an opportunity, and they're moving away from it because, and it could be even just like the opportunity to get coffee with somebody that you think you can learn from, something just as benign and simple as that. But just the idea that you're going out of the house to meet a stranger, that starts triggering fears in your brain that the people you live around are going to start judging you and thinking it's something it's not, or whatever it is, right? So I see these situations with people where they're holding themselves back from something. I see that they see value in an opportunity, they see value in an experience, and they are shutting themselves down, they're cutting themselves off, and they did not actually even talk to anyone. They never even had a conversation with anybody. They're just cutting themselves off, right? And it's frustrating. So I think when you see somebody else doing that, it's a bummer, because you see like, but that's going to be a good opportunity for you. It's a good experience. Why would you just not do it? Because you're afraid of other people's opinions, but you haven't even found out what their real opinion is, right? Judging them for that stupidity is not going to help, because like it's a very strong thing. Fear of FOPO is strong, and you're probably not going to be able to turn it off overnight. So I would just suggest hold space for people, show them that you understand that. Say, look, I know how that feels when maybe share an experience, and don't focus on trying to get them to do the thing that you think is good for them, but maybe just get them to focus more on what's the feeling that they're having. Like, so you actually kind of want, like, if you can get people to admit, yes, I really do think this path would be good for me. I really do think I should do this thing, but I'm afraid of other people's opinions. Like, they want me to go to school and take this class, and I don't think that's my path. I think I should do this. And don't focus on the decision, but focus on helping them understand, like, first of all, journal about what you actually want. So if you admit to yourself, like, this is the thing I want, and here are the reasons why, right? And make sure that that's like well thought out. But if it is, then helping them just notice where they're feeling that feeling. It's like, okay, yeah, when I contemplate this course of action, I get a really tight feeling in my stomach, or I get a tense feeling in my shoulders, and then I just dislike that feeling so much that I just don't even want to think about doing the thing anymore. Okay, so why don't you just sit with that for a minute and try to figure out what that is? Is it because you're actually afraid of whose opinion? Like, figure out, maybe try to compartment, or try to tie it down, and really get it clear. It's like, okay, I'm actually afraid that my uncle John has always wanted me to be a doctor, and he paid for this, and da da da, whatever it is. Like, okay, so just think about that and let it sit. Maybe don't press it. Don't press it. Just get really sure that this is, and then maybe help them see, like, if you don't, if you can maybe find examples of people that you both know, where when people go down a path that isn't really what they wanted, they end up feeling really resentful, and they end up feeling, yeah, like regret and maybe even resentment that they got forced to do something. But that's not really fair, because you didn't actually have the right conversations with people to really figure it out, right? So if you spend enough time to think about the path you're about to go down that is not what you really want, and if you really imagine going down that path and thinking, I might really be misaligned with myself if I do this, right? So then, do you think it would be a good idea, even if it's scary? Do you think the right kind of conversation is possible with your uncle? Do you think it would be possible to have a conversation where you actually sit down with him and you share with him what you've actually been wanting, and what your vision is for your future, and just talk through it? Sometimes when people have those conversations, they actually find out they're not nearly. I've heard many people talk, I think even in some of our interviews, where people said, yeah, I really thought somebody was going to be against something, but when I had the conversation, I found out, no, they actually supported what I wanted.
Thanks, Eli, and thanks, Army, for a question. And thank you, guys. Keep the questions coming. We have one from Virtual Automate. I'm an introvert. What is your tips to get this over? And it affect me a lot with when I see others' opinions about me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it happens to us all the time where somebody says something or does something that makes us feel pretty sure that they are not thinking highly of us. Again, like I said earlier, most of the time we're not right about that. Most of the time we're making it up. We're making it way worse than it really is. But you have to ask yourself some questions like, as far as we know, we get one shot at this life, right? And we have some amount of a potential inside of us. We don't even know what that potential is because has any human ever completely maxed out their potential? Not that we know of. So like our potential is just so much more than what we're living right now, right? And nobody feels good if they don't. I mean, like if we feel like we're not in any if we feel like we're living way below our potential, it sucks. It feels not good, right? So you have to just sort of ask yourself, like, are you willing to live a life that maybe at the end of your life you're going to look back at and be unhappy with because you just held yourself back for these other people's opinions when other people's opinions don't actually hold very much power over us. When, and maybe you can journal about it. It's like when do the opinions of others actually hold power over us? Judges, police. I mean, it's pretty rare, right? You have to go so far over the line before other people's opinions start to really, really cause you, like, put force on you. So what we're actually doing is we're going through life and we are deciding to limit ourselves based on our imagination of what other people think about us, right? And it's powerful and it's scary and it's not easy to let go of and it's not easy to change, but this is actually why I've written this book that's almost finished called Scary Equals Happy, because I believe that practicing doing micro scary things, little tiny things that make us uncomfortable, that don't actually have any real risk, are a great way to train our brains that the things we think are dangerous are really not dangerous, right? So I've got a bunch of examples in the book, like talking to people in a coffee shop, or there's like a lot of different things we can do to practice this. But I will wrap up my answer to this question by saying I started life as an introvert, believe it or not, and I was very, 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 very conscious of what I thought other people thought about me. I was always thinking people were looking at me in public places. I was quiet. I didn't really talk in public places that much. Like I was just a kind of an observant, quiet introvert. And yeah, I was pretty shy. But I've become, I think, an ambivert. Like I like to be alone, but I also like to be with other people. And I think we all, whether you start life kind of as an extrovert and you always want to be around other people and you're really good at being with other people, but maybe you hate being alone and you like loud, but you don't like quiet, that's not good either. Like we need to go in and out. So I think a thriving human becomes an ambivert no matter where you started. So if you feel like you're an introvert, that's fine. It's not a bad thing, but it's also not a fixed thing. It's something that you can, it's malleable. It's something that you can adjust over time. And if you think of yourself as a ball of clay and you're also the sculptor, like okay, so you're an introvert right now, but you're malleable and you can actually over time you can adjust that. And the way to adjust it is just by building a habit of doing small, safe, scary things, things that you're very uncomfortable with, but that have no risk. And you just keep doing them. And you start to realize, like, oh my God, those were not dangerous. There was no risk. And it's actually, here's the thing. You start to realize that every time you do a little scary thing, you feel amazing afterward because your confidence goes up, right? Your belief in yourself, your competence, your confidence, like how you feel about yourself, it just keeps climbing all the time. And yeah, so that's what I would say about that.
Yeah. And one tip I could also share for you is surround yourself with sort of like-minded people. Like being part of a community is really important. I'm also an introvert and I just like to listen. But when I started doing the Scale You community, it actually allows me to express myself because I know I'm in a safe place, and the people that's in that community are people who will not judge me, people who will actually encourage me. So find those kind of people where you can actually practice sharing your authentic self, and people that will encourage you and uplift you. So that's really, very powerful.
Yeah,
Can help.
that's really good recommendation. EJ, who said something about being um, having a hard time looking for a job and being afraid about what people would say about him or her. I don't know. Um, what Gladys just said is really key. Is like if you feel kind of very alone in your decisions, etc. If you can find other people that are also trying to grow themselves, trying to understand themselves, and build a circle that supports you, you might, like I would say, not everybody is lucky enough to grow up in a place where you really have a lot of support. And that doesn't mean you don't have a good family, but not all families really know how to genuinely support each other. Like it's hard. I'd say actually very few families are good at supporting each other and really understanding, because everybody's kind of living this life where they're kind of scared, and they're trying to stay alive. They're trying to just survive. And yeah, so it's important to look for people and that's why we're trying to build this community with Emerge, where people who are working to grow themselves will not feel alone. That you can tap in. You don't have to be in the same place. You can build relationships with people at a distance. So yeah,
Yes.
I like what Lorna said about uh, the the second one.
Yeah, oftentimes,
The second
FOPO.
one.
Oh, what are your thoughts about FOPO being a mirror of how we perceive ourselves, like an image we would rather have others to have of us?
Yeah. So on a psychology level, I really deeply believe that the vast majority of the times that or the vast majority of the fears we have, let's say the perception or the imagination of what we think other people think of us, right? So we're projecting it into their minds. We don't know what they really think. We didn't even do the thing, so how could they think anything? We didn't ask them about it. It's just idea comes in your head, boom, assumption of what their judgment will be, right? Usually so far off base. But most of those fears are really based on our own insecurities about ourselves, right? So if you have a judgment of yourself, you have you have guilt or shame, or something you're thinking about doing is like going to make you think it's going to make you feel bad about yourself in some way, right? So let's say, I don't know, let's say you're thinking about dating, or whatever the thing might be that you're thinking about doing, and some programming inside of you, whether it's cultural or religious or whatever it is, that that if you do this thing, a little part of you, because of this programming that you may or may not have chosen, you may or may not be sure if you agree with it. Part of you doesn't agree with it. That you're afraid that you're going to judge yourself, and you're actually projecting on somebody else the thing, the judgment, because you're consciously, you don't know you're doing that. But most of these judgments, they're not the other person's judgment. It's actually your potential judgment of yourself, or your insecurity, or something you believe about yourself that's negative, something like that.
Right, and I want to congratulate Hazel for overcoming that fear of other people's opinion and eventually enjoying dancing at Maya. I miss going there, dancing bachata and salsa.
Definitely. Dancing can be dancing, speaking in public, but yeah, dancing is amazing because it's fun anyway, right? But it's like so scary. It makes us feel even. I've been doing scary things on purpose for a long, long time. But and I can dance even without drinking, like in a club. But Spanish dancing, or like formal dancing, still, when I imagine doing it, I imagine the fear of other people's opinions because I think I'll be awkward at it or I just don't know what I'm doing. And that tells me that I need to do it. Seriously.
Let's
I don't
do it.
want to, but I know I need to. So if she actually invites me, I have a rule for myself that I would say yes because I'm not comfortable.
Noted. We
That's
have
not an invitation or suggestion, but it's true.
we have a question from Keisha. Is it possible to avoid having your own opinions and people by simply being an observer? Will changing your own behavior change your perception of FOPO? Good question.
Let me read it to myself one more time. Is it possible to avoid having your own opinions of people by simply being an observer? Will changing your own behavior change your perception of FOPO? So by what does it mean simply being an observer? What do you think she means? Like,
I think for me, like, since I've become aware of less judging of other people,
got it.
so now I've changed. Like, it also helped me lessen the fear
Yes.
of other people's opinion. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so yes, now I think I understand what you're saying, Keisha. Totally, yes. I think our own habits of judgment. So I think there's a direct correlation between how judgy I am and how judgy I think other people are. If I go around with the habit of being critical of people all the time, how people walk going down the street, how fat somebody is, whatever it is, right? Which I used to do. Like in the US, I used to be really critical. And yes, I think I'm translating, I'm kind of maybe turning the lens backwards here and looking at it from the other angle, but the opposite of the observer is the critic, right? So the critic, if you are constantly judging other people, you are probably imagining that other people are constantly judging you. I have no idea if they are or not, but I do agree with you. I think this is a really fascinating thing you just said, Keisha. As I made a practice of letting go of judgment and realizing that it just doesn't have any value, and I think I got really good at it, and then maybe I've gotten away from it lately a little bit. Like I think I've weakened my habit of being non-judgmental. But the more non-judgmental you can become, the more accepting and appreciative and just like observant and understanding you can become, the less you think other people are judging you. I do think that's true, if that's what you're kind of asking.
Yes,
Yeah.
totally agree.
It's this one.
We have from EJ, I carried the anxiety of the younger me from today. Is there a way to get rid this kind of problem? And how do I get enough courage for me to see what reality is?
This is a deep question, EJ, and I'm reading into it and thinking about what you might be talking about. I perceive that perhaps you are saying that you had maybe traumas or things that happened to you in your younger years that caused you a lot of anxiety, and that you are still carrying that even now. And so, how do you have enough courage to see what reality is? I really do believe that all of us have, let's say, wounds or traumas. There's different words you can use for it, but there are these things that happen to us when we're younger. They're not necessarily tragedies. Typically what happens is when we're kids, something happens that we don't understand. Maybe we're not kids, maybe we're older. It doesn't matter what age you are, but at some point in your life, things happen to you that disappoint you dramatically. They scare you really bad, whatever it is, like something that just happens that you don't understand why it happened, because it was completely, it broke your worldview. Let's say when you're 3 years old and it's the first time your mom ever yelled at you, and you're like, I thought it was completely safe with this person, and it just kind of shatters your worldview. You don't understand that she was just grumpy that day and it had nothing to do with you, or whatever it is. You don't understand that it has no bearing on how much she loves you. What happens is that we make up stories that explain to us what happened, and a lot of times those stories are something like, I wasn't good enough, I'm stupid, whatever it is, we come up with these stories. People can't be trusted. People are, you know, people, whatever the story is, that connects to that bad thing that happened, then these issues go with us for a very long time, right? What's pretty amazing about that is when you can discover the patterns that are happening in your life and you realize kind of maybe where they came from. And if you can lean in, a lot of times it helps to have other people around you so you're not doing it alone. But through conversations, we can discover that these patterns are happening in us, and we can just realize like, every time this happens, I get this fear or this is triggered, and we can start to let go of them. Yeah, I remember a few that once I discovered, it's like it was so emotional, but after that, it didn't have nearly as much power anymore. So I guess my suggestion would be patient with yourself and keep asking questions like that. There's a podcast I would really recommend that Gladys and I really love called the Life Coach School podcast. We can put the link, or maybe I'll type it here in a minute, or you can type it. The Life Coach School podcast by Brooke Castillo. There's a bunch of amazing episodes in there where she talks about all the facets of the human psyche and the human experience. I think it's an amazing place to learn about how people work, and stay connected to the Emerge community, EmergePH, because we're going to be creating more and more community events and opportunities to connect with other people that you can learn from. And also check out the interviews that we're doing, because the purpose of those interviews is to tell the stories of people who have gone through probably something really similar. So if you can find in our stories, if you see a short where maybe that little 1-minute video you can relate with it somehow, I would really recommend go watch the full interview from that person and see if that person's story somehow inspires you or teaches you something. And if you want to connect with that person, then you can also reach out to us, and we might be able to get you connected so you could even ask questions from that person. So yeah, the best way to learn, keep in mind, we are all in some ways unique, but really we're all kind of the same. We're all having pretty much a very similar human experience. We feel the same emotions. We feel like we go through some of the same patterns, right? And there's a lot of people on this planet that have gone through what you're going through. So somehow we have this idea that we're unique, because we are, but our experiences are really something, luckily we can learn from other people's experiences that have gone before us. So try to find someone else who has dealt with something similar, who understands it better than you do, and just keep learning. Give yourself time. One more question.
We have from Leslie. Can you give me a kind of pocket size strategy or strategies for me to use every time I have an attack of FOPO? Something that is easy to remember and something that worked for you.
Thank you, Leslie. Good to hear from you. Yeah, I think just going back, well, anytime something seizes us, so if something kind of grabs you, you're going to feel it in your body, right? And we often are not aware that our breathing has changed, and your breathing gets shallower, it gets maybe faster. If you can raise awareness of those things, I think somatic or body awareness is really a great place to start. So if possible, maybe even remove yourself from the situation for a minute so that you can actually do a little breathing, maybe even do a little 1 or 2 minutes of kind of meditation to get your nervous system calmed back down, and then start talking to yourself. Like ask yourself questions like, is it true? Does this person actually have this opinion of me? Or would they have this opinion of me if I did this thing? How do I know it's true? Can I find opposite evidence? And you might be surprised at the answers that you get. And part of the opposite evidence for me is that I know that people just aren't actually spending time thinking about me. And I know that people are way more supportive in general. And also flip it around. If I was that person, would I be that judgmental of me? Probably not. Are you, you wouldn't. So why would they? If they actually understood why you're deciding what you're deciding or whatever it is, right? So am I so critical? Well, would they be? If they go through life that critical, that's sad for them. But how does it affect you, right? Most of the time, if they really did have the judgments that we're afraid of, it wouldn't affect us that much, right? So I don't know. You just kind of package together what works for you. I'm not sure those like it's the dialogue that you have with yourself. It's the way you talk to yourself about yourself and about this situation. So I don't know if the ways that I do it would work for everyone. So
Those questions, though, are very powerful. Now, Mayanne, hi Mayanne. Facing criticism is tough. How do you handle it and stay focused on your goals?
criticism, yeah. So depends on what the criticism is like, but and who it's coming from. Thank you for the question, man. Um, Criticism and feedback, they're not the same thing, but they're similar. A lot of times feedback feels like criticism and it's not. In my mind, criticism is when somebody is actually trying to push you down, or they're trying, their intent is to make you feel low, small, or bad about yourself. I don't think criticism happens nearly as often as we think it does. Most of the time, it's probably some kind of feedback that we're just taking negatively. And maybe it's just very poorly delivered feedback. Maybe the person's intent was positive. They just suck at the way they say it. So, just saying that first. Because I know I've given feedback a million times that made people feel like they were being criticized. That's probably one of my worst weaknesses. Um, so just try to remember that. It's like, hey, probably it's not really as critical as you think. But how do you stay focused on your goals? I would go watch the interview with Army and just look at how much she loves data. She loves feedback. And anytime something happens in your life where you don't get the results you wanted, it's just data. There's no such thing as failure. There's no such thing as failure unless you say it's failure. It's just data. Okay, that didn't work. I wonder why. What can I learn from this so I can move forward and try again next time? And when we don't get the results we want of somebody else's approval, it hurts. But seeking other people's approval is actually really not what I mean, you'll never, it's a futile thing to go after anyway. So what we actually need is our own approval. And when we realize that and we start realizing that we can give ourselves the love and the approval that we need first, and we can become whole to the point where even if somebody else actually criticizes us, it's not going to matter that much because, well, I know what I think about myself strong enough that their opinion is not really that relevant to me. I still want their feedback. I still want their data. I want to know their perspective, right? And when I'm thinking about somebody's perspective and whether it matters to me, I'm thinking, does this person have a perspective that I consider credible? Like, are they a credible party? Are they an expert on this thing, right? Or do they care about me? Do they have my best interest at heart? If the answer is no to those two things, like they're not an expert on this thing, their credibility is low, and they don't have my back and they don't care about me, why do I care at all about their opinion, right? I don't. If they're credible, and even if they're criticizing me, even if they hate me, but they're credible, I'm going to think about this for a minute, even if it hurts. Because you know what? Maybe I should give this more thought, even if I don't agree with it in the beginning, because they are a credible party. Somebody tells me they don't like my marketing design, or they don't like my strategy in my business, even if they're rude and jerks about it, if they're an expert, I'm still going to I'm still going to see if there's data that I can extract because, like Army said, like I want the feedback. I want the data. I want to know how I can learn and grow and improve. But if they aren't credible and they don't have my back, it's my job to just filter it out. So I think we need to wrap up because we're already over an hour. But when I was in Toastmasters, first couple of years I was there, I was learning about feedback and how to deliver it, how to get it, how to receive it. And I realized that it's really the feedback receiver's job to filter. It's our job to decide what's useful and what's not. And I think we should never reject feedback simply because it hurts. But I do think sometimes we need to reject feedback because of its source, and it's like maybe the person just doesn't have any understanding, and we should just brush it off. It's like, oh, I understand why they said it, but I don't think it's useful. Move on. But if it is useful, even if it hurts, try to figure out how you can use it.
Nice. Well, I guess that's it for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on our first live and for throwing in some beautiful question here. And any,
Yeah, I mean, it means a lot to us just that you guys are here. It's, it's a little bit scary to do this live, and we really want the feedback. So even if it's not positive, like even if there's something you think that we're not doing very well, please be honest and tell us. You can tell us directly or even in the comments, whatever. This is the first try, but yeah, really appreciate you guys being here and asking questions. And if you think even you can give suggestions on how I answer questions and the way I word things, like anything is fair game. Would love your feedback. So thank you guys for being here, and really need your help to build this community. It's not something that we're going to be able to do alone. So thank you for being an early part of it. And yeah, appreciate you.
appreciate you guys, and see you next month for another streaming. Take care,
See you soon.
everyone.